Imagine waking up one morning in 1944. You step outside your small farm in Oregon, the air crisp and calm, the war a distant nightmare echoing across the ocean. You glance up at the clear blue sky and see something glinting, drifting silently, impossibly high. A white-shaped balloon-like, slowly descending. You can't hear it, can't tell what it is. But within that serene silence hides a weapon from across the Pacific Ocean, a weapon no one in America ever expected could reach them. Because what you're looking at isn't a weather balloon. It's a bomb. During the final, desperate years of World War II, Japan launched one of the most bizarre, ambitious, and secretive attacks in modern history. An operation so strange it sounds like a science fiction plot. An invisible aerial assault on North America, using hydrogen-filled balloons that floated across the Pacific Ocean, riding the jet stream. And it actually worked. Between 1944 and 1945, Japan released over 9,000 of these so-called Fugo balloon bombs, each a deadly device designed to ignite fires, cause panic, and strike fear deep inside the American homeland. They were the world's first intercontinental weapons, launched not by aircraft, not by rockets, but by the wind itself. But this wasn't just a desperate gimmick. It was part of a calculated plan, a final attempt to make America bleed at home, to disrupt morale, to divert resources, and to remind the Allies that Japan could still reach them even from thousands of miles away. The story of Japan's hydrogen balloon bombs isn't one you often hear about in history books. It's a story buried by wartime secrecy, by censorship, and by the sheer unlikeliness of it all. Yet it's one of the most remarkable and chilling episodes of World War II. It began with a discovery made years before the bombs ever took flight. High above the Pacific Ocean, at altitudes of 30,000 feet, a powerful river of air constantly flows from west to east. Today we know it as a jet stream, a fast-moving current that can carry weather systems, airplanes, and as it turned out, bombs. The jet stream was first discovered by Japanese meteorologists in the 1930s. They realized it could be used not just for studying the weather, but for delivering weapons across continents. By 1944, Japan was under siege. Its navy crippled, its cities burning, and its supply lines cut off. The empire's scientists were desperate for a way to strike back against the United States mainland, something that could bypass the Allied naval blockade and prove Japan still had technological might. So, the Japanese Army's 9th Technical Research Laboratory was tasked with creating a weapon that could ride the wind. The result was both ingenious and terrifying. Each Fugo balloon was a massive, 15-meter-wide sphere, made from lightweight paper, glued together from hundreds of handmade sheets. The material came from the bark of the mulberry tree, strong, flexible, and cheap. The balloon was filled with hydrogen, a gas far lighter than air, capable of lifting the bomb to stratospheric heights. But this wasn't just a floating balloon. It was a mechanical marvel. Beneath it hung a steel ring carrying multiple sandbags, barometers, and most importantly, a series of incendiary and fragmentation bombs. The engineers designed an automatic altitude control system using simple barometric switches. Whenever the balloon sank too low, it dropped a sandbag to lighten itself. When it rose too high, a vent opened to release hydrogen. This way, the balloon could maintain a steady height, riding the jet stream for days on end, silently crossing the Pacific Ocean toward North America. It was, in essence, the first unmanned intercontinental weapon system in history. The idea was as bold as it was desperate. The Japanese believed that if they could send enough balloons, some would reach American forests during winter, ignite massive wildfires, and create panic among civilians. They imagined it as a morale-breaking psychological attack, a way to make the American people feel that no place was safe. So, in November 1944, the first Fugo balloons were launched from the eastern coast of Japan. Hidden in forest clearings and coastal plains, teams of soldiers released the massive paper spheres one after another, watching as they drifted skyward and vanished into the distance. The project was codenamed Fugo, meaning wind ship weapon. The Japanese High Command hoped that even if only 10% of the balloons reached their target, the results would be devastating. They sent them in waves, thousands at a time, trusting the wind to deliver their vengeance. And, incredibly, some did. A few weeks later, American radar stations along the West Coast began picking up strange, high-altitude objects drifting inland. Reports came in from Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and even as far east as Michigan. Some landed in open fields. Some exploded. Many simply vanished in the wilderness, their fuses doused by rain or snow. But none of this was made public. The U.S. government quickly realized what was happening, but fear that revealing the truth might panic the public, or worse, help Japan confirm that their attacks were working. So, the military imposed strict censorship. Newspapers and radio stations were forbidden from reporting on balloon bomb sightings or explosions. It became a silent war, one fought in secret skies, with invisible weapons and no headlines. While most of the balloons caused little damage, they were capable of real destruction. Each one carried up to 30 pounds of explosives, enough to start forest fires, damage property, or kill anyone nearby. American scientists, tracking the debris, were stunned by the precision of Japan's engineering. Some balloons traveled over 5,000 miles across one of the world's most unpredictable oceans and still functioned exactly as intended. In the snowy woods of Montana, one balloon landed intact, its bombs unexploded. In California, another was found tangled in power lines, briefly knocking out electricity to part of the Hanford nuclear facility, the site that produced plutonium for the atomic bomb. But for months, the general public had no idea that foreign weapons were literally drifting overhead. To most Americans, the war felt far away, something happening over there. No one imagined that silent killers might be floating above their homes, carried by nothing more than the wind. The Japanese scientists were ecstatic when reports trickled in through intercepted American radio chatter and vague intelligence that balloons had reached North America. They believed their plan was working, but what they didn't know was that almost no one in America had heard a word about it. And then something happened that changed everything. In May 1945, in the quiet forests of Oregon, a family picnic turned into tragedy, the only fatal attack on the U.S. mainland during World War II. That's where the story of the Fugo balloons took its darkest turn. It was May 5, 1945. The war in Europe was almost over. Germany was collapsing, and in the small town of Bly, Oregon, the sun rose gently over the pines, warming the forest floor. A Sunday school teacher named Elsie Mitchell was hosting a picnic for her students. A simple outing, a chance to escape the worries of wartime America. They drove into the mountains, laughing, carrying sandwiches, unaware that something strange had landed in the woods nearby. As the children wandered off, they spotted something tangled in the brush, a strange white balloon, half buried in the soil, ropes and metal dangling from it. Elsie called out, warning them not to touch it. But before she could finish her sentence, the device exploded. The blast echoed to the forest, tearing through the air with horrifying force. Elsie Mitchell and 5 children were killed instantly. They were the only American civilians killed by enemy action on the U.S. mainland during World War II. News of the tragedy was met with confusion, then silence. The U.S. government had a difficult choice to make. If they told the public about balloon bombs, people might panic. And worse, Japan might learn their weapons were actually reaching America. If they said nothing, they risked more unsuspecting civilians stumbling upon unexploded devices. For weeks, the government kept the story under wraps. It wasn't until after the war ended that the truth was finally revealed, and the world learned just how close Japan had come to bringing the war to American soil. But the story of the balloon bombs is more than just one tragic explosion. It's a saga of innovation, secrecy, and sheer audacity, a scientific gamble born out of desperation. When the project began, Japan scientists faced immense challenges. Building a balloon that could survive the brutal temperatures and winds of the jet stream, over 30,000 feet high, was no simple feat. The paper had to be both lightweight and gas-tight. Hydrogen leaked easily, so they used an ingenious paste made from a sticky root called konnyaku, the same plant used in traditional Japanese food. It helped seal the paper and make it flexible enough to withstand the cold. Each balloon took weeks to build and was assembled in secrecy by schoolgirls and housewives working in rural workshops. Many of them had no idea what they were building. They just glued sheets of paper together under orders, part of a war effort that promised to defend the homeland. The launch sites were equally secret. They stretched along Japan's east coast, mostly on the main island of Honshu. Each site had rows of massive balloons tethered to ground, hydrogen generators roaring nearby, soldiers monitoring weather conditions to catch the right jet stream currents. When the wind was right, they would release them one by one. The soldiers stood silently, watching their pale shapes drift upward into the cold sky, disappearing toward a world they would never see. Each balloon carried a payload of around 30 kilograms of explosives, including incendiary bombs meant to start wildfires across America's Pacific Northwest. The Japanese military hoped the dry forests of Oregon, Washington, and California would ignite easily, tying up American firefighting resources and spreading terror. But fate and the weather were not on Japan's side. Winter storms, snow, and rain dampened the forests. The Pacific Northwest was far wetter than Japan expected. Many of the incendiaries fizzled out harmlessly. Others fell into the mountains or deserts, never to be found. Still, about 300 of the 9,000 launched are known to have reached North America, a staggering success rate considering the odds. They were discovered in some of the most unlikely places: Alaska, British Columbia, Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Nevada, and even as far as Michigan. One balloon was found in Mexico. Another reached Detroit. One reportedly landed in Wyoming, its fuse still burning. Scientists and soldiers were stunned. How could a paper balloon cross an entire ocean? The U.S. military's secret investigation into the phenomenon was codenamed Operation Firefly. Teams from the FBI, the Army, and the Forest Service scoured the wilderness for wreckage, tried to understand how the devices worked. They found fragments of Japanese paper, fuses with kanji inscriptions, and sandbags filled with materials traced back to specific beaches in Japan. By early 1945, they had pieced it together. The balloons were riding the jet stream, a discovery that even many American meteorologists didn't fully understand at the time. Ironically, Japan's attacks had revealed a new frontier of atmospheric science. But while most balloons caused little physical harm, the psychological potential was enormous. Japan believed the Fugo campaign could terrify civilians, disrupt industry, and prove that their empire could still strike back. In their propaganda, they called it the revenge of the wind. American officials, however, understood the stakes differently. They feared the balloons might carry something far worse: biological weapons. Intelligence reports suggested Japan's infamous Unit 731, which had conducted human experimentation and germ warfare in China, might be involved. There were whispers that future balloons could carry plague or anthrax spores, potentially devastating American cities. To prevent panic and discourage Japan from escalating the campaign, the U.S. government maintained a tight lid on all information. Only after the Oregon tragedy was it clear how dangerous silence could be. In total, only a handful of people were injured or killed by the Fugo weapons. But the story doesn't end there. Years after the war, unexploded balloon bombs continue to surface in remote areas. In 1955, one was found deep in the woods of British Columbia. In 1984, a forest ranger in Wyoming discovered another. In 2014, nearly 70 years later, workers in Canada found one still intact, its rusted components a ghostly reminder of a forgotten war. Even today, some are believed to lie hidden in the wilderness, their paper long decayed, but their metal frames buried under soil and leaves. The Fugo campaign may have been a military failure, but it stands as a haunting symbol of human ingenuity in the face of desperation. For Japan, it was one of the last flickers of a dying empire, an attempt to turn nature itself into a weapon. For the United States, it was a sobering reminder that even oceans couldn't guarantee safety. The mainland had been touched by the war, not through invasion fleets or bombers, but by the wind. And while the Fugo balloons caused limited destruction, they left behind an unsettling question. If a simple paper balloon could cross an ocean and strike unseen, what might future weapons be capable of? By the spring of 1945, as Allied bombers leveled Japan's cities, the Fugo program was quietly abandoned. The war was turning irrevocably against Japan. Their scientists packed up their notes. Their remaining balloons were destroyed, and the project faded into obscurity. But for those who witnessed it, The farmers who found strange debris in their fields, the soldiers who investigated mysterious fires, the families in Bly who lost loved ones. It was a story that would never truly vanish. And what happened after the war revealed just how close Japan's strange wind weapons came to changing history forever. Because deep within those wrecked balloons lay a secret, one that could turn the skies over America into something far deadlier than anyone realized. As the last months of World War II ticked away, Japan's strange balloon campaign quietly faded into background noise of a collapsing empire. Allied bombers roared over Tokyo. Cities burned to ashes, and fuel shortages crippled what little remained of the Japanese war machine. The Fugo project, once hailed as a symbol of scientific genius, was now seen as a ghost weapon, drifting uselessly into the void. But in the shadows of history, what the world didn't realize was just how dangerous that idea could have become. When American investigators finally studied the recovered balloon bombs after the war, they were stunned by what they found. The level of precision in the design was remarkable. Pressure regulators, timers, ballast systems, all constructed from simple materials, yet capable of functioning flawlessly for days. The system was so advanced that modern engineers, decades later, would still admire its efficiency. It was one of the earliest examples of an autonomous weapon, decades before the invention of drones. But there were darker discoveries, too. Documents recovered in Japan revealed that some military officials had considered attaching not just incendiaries, but biological weapons. Pathogens cultured by Unit 731, the same unit infamous for human experimentation in China. They tested the concept on animals, releasing plague-infested fleas from balloons to see if they could survive high-altitude flight. The results were inconclusive, and Japan's surrender came before such weapons could be used. Had those plans been approved, the Fugo campaign might have transformed from an obscure footnote to one of the deadliest acts of biological warfare in human history. The idea of a floating bomb traveling silently across the ocean to deliver disease remains one of the most chilling what-ifs of the war. By the summer of 1945, Japan had launched its last balloon. The war was nearly lost. American forces were already advancing through Okinawa, and the atomic bomb was only months away from changing everything. The Fugo teams quietly disbanded. Their records were burned, their launch sites dismantled, and the world forgot. In the United States, the government finally lifted the veil of secrecy. Newspapers ran stories about the mysterious Japanese balloon bombs, revealing that the strange objects seen floating across the skies of America had been part of a long-hidden campaign. Families who'd heard rumors or found odd debris now learned the truth. For the people of Bly, Oregon, the revelation brought both clarity and heartbreak. The names of the victims, Elsie Mitchell, Sherman Shoemaker, Dick Patz, Jay Gifford, and Joan Patz, were etched forever into the history of that quiet town. The government's silence had prevented panic, but it also meant no one had been warned of the danger. To this day, that decision remains controversial. As decades passed, the story of the Fugo campaign slipped into obscurity. Textbooks barely mentioned it. Even historians often dismissed it as a curiosity, an eccentric side project from a desperate nation. But in the quiet corners of North America, the remnants of that strange war still appear from time to time. In 1953, a rancher in Nevada discovered a corroded bomb buried in the soil. In 1962, another was unearthed in Alaska. Forest rangers found fragments in Canada in the 1970s. And in 2014, nearly 70 years after the war, a group of forestry workers stumbled upon a half-buried balloon bomb in the mountains of British Columbia. Bomb disposal experts were called in. The weapon was still live. It was defused safely, but the discovery sent shivers down the spine of history. Even decades later, these ghostly remnants of Japan's wind-borne weapons still haunted the land they were meant to destroy. Yet the Fugo campaign, despite its failure to cause mass destruction, had profound consequences. It revealed something new about the planet itself, the power of the jet stream. Before the war, few people outside of scientific circles understood that a high-altitude river of air circled the globe, capable of carrying objects thousands of miles. Japan's experiment proved it. In a strange way, their weapon helped pioneer the study of modern meteorology and atmospheric science. It also showed that long-range, unmanned weapons were possible. That realization would echo in the decades to come, from early guided missiles to space-launched intercontinental systems. The idea that a weapon could cross oceans without a pilot or a ship began here, with a paper balloon and the wind. For Japan, the Fugo project became a symbol of both ingenuity and futility. It represented the brilliance of a nation's scientists, and the tragedy of a war that drove them to use that brilliance in desperation. In the end, the Fugo campaign caused minimal physical damage, but it reflected the same mindset that produced kamikaze pilots, suicide submarines, and other desperate weapons in the final stages of the Pacific War. It was an empire fighting its inevitable end, clinging to hope in the most unconventional ways imaginable. For the Americans, it was a reminder that isolation was an illusion. The Pacific Ocean, once thought of as an impenetrable wall, had been crossed not by fleets, but by the sky itself. The war had reached their homeland, not through invasion, but through the invisible current above. After the war, Japan's surviving scientists were interrogated by Allied forces. Many expressed disbelief that their creations had made it so far. Others were proud. One engineer, when shown a recovered American balloon, reportedly smiled and said softly, "So, the wind truly carried our message." But his message had not been one of victory. It had been a whisper from a defeated nation, carried by the last breath of its war machine. Today, few people know the story of the Fugo balloon bombs. There are no great monuments, no major films, no famous battles tied to them. Yet they remain one of the most fascinating and eerie episodes of World War II, a story where science, desperation, and nature collided. Think about it. A weapon made of paper and glue, powered by hydrogen, guided only by the air itself, traveling across an entire ocean. No engines, no pilots, just patience, wind, and faith. It's the kind of weapon that feels impossible, almost poetic. It speaks to both the brilliance and the madness of human invention, the lengths to which nations will go when cornered by war. The Fugo campaign failed to change the outcome of the conflict, but it succeeded in doing something no other weapon of the time could. It connected two continents through the invisible breath of the earth. And for a few fleeting months in 1944 and 1945, the skies above North America were not as empty as they seemed. Above the clouds, silent and unseen, thousands of ghostly balloons drifted in the jet stream, borne by the wind, carrying fire and steel across the vast Pacific. Most never reached their destination. Some fell into the sea. Others vanished forever into the wilderness. But each one told the same story, that even in its final, desperate hour, Japan refused to surrender quietly. It turned to the sky itself, to the most ancient force on Earth, to carry its last strike across the world. The Fugo balloon bombs were not the most powerful weapon of the war, but they were among the strangest and, in some ways, the most haunting. Because while the sound of engines fades and the smoke of battle clears, the wind never stops moving. And somewhere in that endless current, the echoes of those drifting weapons, those silent paper ghosts, still ride the air, whispering across the Pacific, long after the war they were built for has ended.